that's the little sketch that I've done of the subject. And let's see if we can, yeah, that's it up there. So you can see that it's pretty true to life, but I've probably exaggerated a few things, which is, of course, what we're supposed to do. That's why we've got our artistic licenses. We can do what we wish in a painting. And I think it's very important that we don't just copy what is there, because if we only copy what is there, we're restricting ourselves a lot in our subject material. Because if you think about it, if you're only going to paint what's there, then you have to find something that's absolutely perfect for painting. And there are very, very few subjects like that. So I think all subjects need altered to some extent. Big full brush. And in terms of the sky, I'm not going to be worrying exactly what way the sky is in the original photograph. What I'll do is just do something like that. It's quite a busy sky, and perhaps I don't want anything just so busy. So we'll get a little bit of blue on, and then just some water, plenty of water. And I'm just going to go back in, and I'm just going to sort of work around that with plenty of water, making sure my edges don't dry. We can get little clouds out from that if we want sort of little cumulus clouds. I just use a little bit of kitchen roll. And I sort of use the kitchen roll a bit like a brush. So I have it sort of scrunched up, but I don't hold it here. I sort of hold it back there. And that allows me to get, it's sort of, it means I'm almost painting the edges of the clouds. And that's too floppy. Let's see. It means I can sort of paint the edges of the clouds, and it gives me a much softer, nicer effect. If I sort of do it in there, you'll see hopefully what I mean. And it just gives you that little sort of subtle, slightly hard edge. It's not a hard edge as such, but it's, well, little bit. Just want to drop a little bit of gray in. Again, nothing too fussy. Get a little bit dropped in, and literally I'm sort of just letting the brush dance over the paper. Now, the thing about it being so wet is that will all just run and blend and do its own thing. I don't really need to be worrying too much about what it's doing. And again, that is as long as everything is very wet. Now, where I do want to get a little bit of darkness is just there, because I want a little bit of a light roof there. And I also want a little bit of a light roof just there as well. Okay, let's see. A little bit of cobalt maybe for the distant hills, the hills that overlook Belfast. This is Holywood, incidentally, which is a little town just on the coast, about 5 miles from where I live. Here, as I say, I want to keep everything simple. So the one thing I do not do at this stage is paint things, other than perhaps the sky. I just put color on things. Now you might think, well, that's painting, Graham. That's what we call painting. But it's not really. I'm not painting objects. I'm just painting areas. And it doesn't really matter terribly much what happens at this stage, again, with the proviso that everything stays wet. Now, I must have had a little bit of the burnt sienna on my brush, and I've sort of got weird marks there. Again, best thing, do not panic. Just give out another little spray, and those marks will disappear. They won't disappear instantly, but they will disappear. When we look at them again in a couple of minutes' time, they will be gone. Back into the blue, and I'll just carry on down for the water. And then I want a lot of this to be really sunny. So I'm going to use a good sunny color, I think, is burnt sienna. So if I take quite a weak burnt sienna, maybe a touch of yellow in it just to sunny it up a little bit more. And I'll just use this for the area that's going to be mostly the beach. Rocks and things there, but we'll worry about those later. And then I'm going to let the sand and the water just blend together very simply. A large number of slightly different grays, which is really, really useful for this. Now, again, I'm just going to keep this very, 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 very simple. Now, what I will do is get some of those windows lighter. So how do I get the windows lighter? Well, I'll just leave a few little light stripes in them. Along here, again, we have a few more windows. So once again, I'll leave a couple of little bits of light. Now, why am I leaving those lights? Well, it's simply because it's just to relieve these darks. That's really all it's meant for. The light is there, you know, you can see it, but so the light's obviously reflecting the light from the sea. Now this is another little place. I just want to leave this little roof here also, just a little sliver of light. So all these little bits of light will all help me to just get a little bit of variety. And that's really what we're looking at. It's all to do with variety. Now, I'm just a little bit careful about what I'm trying to do here. But again, I'm going to make sure everything at this stage joins together, blends together. And the other reason, you know, why this helps is because if things all blend together, if you think about it, then you don't have all these separate objects. You simply have just one big shape. And that's what we've got here. So all of the marks that I've made so far, just do that. Everything I've done so far connects together. There is no isolated areas at all. Now, obviously, this will be altered as the painting develops. Now, I'm starting to fiddle already, and I shouldn't. So all these soft blending marks are really just building up the interest, but in a gradual way. Because this is the first time I've painted this particular aspect of this subject. So I'm sort of feeling my way through the painting. And what I don't want to do is take a chance too early, you know, risk something major too early. So I like to keep everything very simple at this stage. Initially, I just want something that's not too dark, because this is going to be a lot of the highlights on the rocks. And what I will do is I'm going to sort of paint down here, and I'll create a few little highlights already. Even though this isn't going to be the final tone of my rocks, they're obviously going to be much darker. But what I'll be able to do with these is just create a little bit of variety. So I try to, when I'm doing any big area of essentially anything, what I will always try to do is get 3 washes into 3 tones. So 3 tonal washes, a light, a medium, and a dark. So I've got my light, which is my first wash. So this is my medium. And then I'll follow that up a little bit later with a dark. Now that's too gray. I want it to be warmer than that. So this is initially just getting me a little bit of variety. So if I paint around my little puddle, this is one of my puddles here, or my damp areas, or whatever you want to call them, just there. There's another one just here. Now, by painting around them, obviously, then they become light. So you create light essentially by adding dark. And I realize you all probably know this, but I'm sort of just working on the basis that some of you may not. So that's sort of why I'm rambling on about these things. Now in here, again, we'll get some light there. And then as this comes away, I just want that to disappear. So I'm just going to take my softening brush again on the paper. You see actually how wet, I think you can see how wet that is. No, you can't. Up to the edge, soften, away from the edge, lift. That's the routine. On the paper, away from the edge, up to the edge, soften, away from the edge, lift. But the paper should be, or the brush should be on the paper at all times before you actually do the softening. C has perspective, and sometimes people tend to think of perspective as only being for buildings and things like that, and it's definitely not. So there's actually a vanishing point for this sea and beach. If you think about the beach, if you look down from a great height onto the beach, you'll be looking down on the beach will be here, the water will be here. And the water coming in waves will be straight, unless it's a rounded bay or something like that, which this isn't. So therefore, everything is parallel lines. And parallel lines, by the rule of perspective, have to meet at a vanishing point on eye level, and eye level is always the horizon. So the vanishing point for my sea is about here. Now that means the edge of my beach is roughly along that line. It'll never be perfect with a sea or a beach, obviously. But if you take this as an idea, it will mean you will always make sure that your beaches and your seas will be flat, and that's the key thing. They must look flat. There's nothing as off-putting as a tilted sea, because you obviously can't get a tilted sea. So I think my vanishing point's about there. So that would mean that goes like that, and then the lines on the sea will come out from this point. So they'll be fairly horizontal until we get down to about there, and then they'll go at a slight angle. The same vanishing point will do for my beach. So you can see that these marks I've made here are not exactly random, because if I follow those up, they will also go to my vanishing point. So I've created a little perspective. Well, I haven't done it with water yet, but I've created a perspective design, if you like, with the beach. So even though there are no bricks and no rooftops and anything like that, perspective still gets involved. So I'll finish off this half with the sea. And I'm not going to do anything much to it, really. So a little bit more of that phthalo blue, just into whatever muck happens to be lying in the palette there. And I'm going to take some water. I'm just going to wet the far side of the loch. And I'm bringing that wetness down to about, I suppose, about a third of the way down. Notice I just painted over the jetty. That's fine. And then I'm going to not go right in at the edge, because that can cause difficulties, but I'm moving up about halfway, and I'm just going to make my first stroke about there. And you can see how that just softens and blends and produces that lovely little blended line. Now then I can leave a little gap. Now remember, this is my vanishing point. So I can sort of bring it down like this and start to create my little wavelets, if you like, that are coming in. So again, vanishing point. So anything here, well, now I don't want to just do a straight line. So what I'm going to do is I'll do a little bit of a slight wavy line. So over here, now what I mean about creating more interest is at the minute that's just a flat shape. It doesn't really tell us an awful lot. Now what I don't want to do is to overdo things and start to create a lot of detail. But what I sort of do like to do is a little indication of the area underneath the eaves, which is always going to be darker. Another little one there. We'll do the same thing there. Notice I'm not being terribly careful. I'm not ruling a perfect line by any means. And then in our windows here, again with these windows, that's just a whole big line of windows. And what I want to do here is try to, I was a little bit careless there, try to create the suggestion of the line of windows without being too fussy about it. Now I think that's a bit too fussy. So I'll use my finger to soften as well as using a brush. So I'm looking for something that gives me a hint of the windows without being sort of too strong. So I'm sort of playing around, and I'm saying, now, will that be enough? Do I need a little bit more? And if I need a little bit more, I'll try a little bit more. But if I do a mark that I don't like, I just Boom, boom, gone. Down in here, we've got a little, this is actually the roof of another little building. So I can show the other little building if I darken here. So if I sort of go around that, all of a sudden you've got a little building there. But of course now I've got this great big dark blob. But with my softening brush, I can go in, soften the edge of that, just let it drift out and away. Okay, back in here, I just want to hint that there are things here. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's a sailing club, so there are going to be various things associated with sailing. I don't sail, so I don't know what they would be. But what I do know is that they are going to be probably 3 different tones. There'll be light parts, medium parts, and dark parts. And they will generally be mostly geometric type of shapes. So they'll either be vertical or horizontal or angled, because that's what things are. So the masts are vertical, the boats are horizontal, etc., etc. So it means that I can get little bits of variety. On that post there, for instance, I can darken the side away from the light. It gives me a little bit of extra interest. And as I come across here, these little marks are only intended just to hint at what might be. Little post there too. There's no post actually there, but the reason I'm putting the post in is that it gives us it gives me a chance to get a decent little splash of shadow from it. So the shadows from these rocks isn't particularly interesting, but it's quite good from the post. So again, trying to get the light, medium, and dark on the rocks, stepping back, having a look, see what it looks like. If it looks all right, I leave it. If I don't think it looks all right, then I'll change it. Trying to get connections again. So I don't want to have too many isolated shapes. I want them to be linking together. And with some of these, they're not going to be all angular rocks. There'll be some soft, quite soft edge. So I just want to, now that's where I made the mistake. I lifted my brush, there was a big drip of water and it has run down into that. The last thing to do is to try and fix it. Just leave it alone. Fixing things in watercolor, as I say, you turn a minor mistake into a major mistake. A few little soft edges, that gives us enough for that. We'll get some shadows on. So for my shadow color, it's going to be, well, it's the mixture that's in the tin there, but we'll use the phthalo and the red. I quite like that as a shadow mixture. Oh, dipped into the wrong thing. And I just want to get that little sliver of light in. There's a shadow from the wall here. That could have done with being slightly soft. You would never get it as hard as that because obviously the wall is also in shade. So I just soften that. Again with my rocks here. So little shadows here and there. There would be lots of little stones on the beach. That's the final marks I'll make. It's probably I could play around with it for another while, but we'll finish off here with a few little dark marks. So that's essentially black. So I can use my ultramarine and burnt sienna. That will give me what is essentially black. And it means then I can just use that just to give me little sparkles. So little dark marks will give me sparkles. Because to get a sparkly light, you just need light against dark, dark against light.